there was a man walking on the beach, and he came upon a stretch of the beach that was covered with starfish all over the beach, up out of the water. And there was a small boy standing there, and he was throwing the starfish, one at a time, back into the ocean. But there were millions of starfish. And the man said, "What good could this possibly do, young man? Throwing one starfish at a time, look at them all." But the boy reached down, he picked it up, and he said, "It's going to make a lot of difference to this one."
All right.
These Santa Cruz citizens are struggling to resolve one of their most pressing community needs, affordable housing. For 2 years, local leaders have tried in vain to develop an approach that would satisfy their diverse interests. Today, they are joined by a broad cross-section of county residents in a future search conference. They have decided to involve citizens from one end of the county to the other in discovering how much common ground exists on housing and many other related issues. During the Future Search Conference, you will see them discover shared aspirations as they recreate 30 years of history in the world, in their own lives, and in the community. You'll watch them inventory what they already are doing about current trends in housing, employment, education, and many other themes. And you'll see what happens when they project themselves 10 years into the future to dramatize the community they really want and how they plan to get there. Before the conference ends, you'll witness the citizens of Santa Cruz County planning a variety of actions together that previously none of them could do alone. At the end of the video, we'll give you a progress report on Santa Cruz 18 months after the conference. Housing was not always a problem in Santa Cruz County. In 1960, the county was loosely divided into 2 areas: a small retirement community around the city of Santa Cruz and an agricultural community around the town of Watsonville. The county population was approximately 25,000 people. In the late 60s, the University of California opened their Santa Cruz campus, creating housing needs for thousands of people. At the same time, with its beautiful scenery and idyllic climate, the Santa Cruz area became a bedroom community for wealthy Silicon Valley executives. By 1990, the population had grown 1,000% to 250,000 people. Real estate prices were driven out of reach of the native residents. Most retired residents had fixed incomes, and many other people were left unemployed by the 1990 recession. Then, in 1992, a major earthquake centered in Santa Cruz turned an already serious housing problem into a community crisis.
We see that this community is in dire need for affordable housing for many people.
They live in housing with several families. They live in garages. The people who live in the community that work in agriculture, work in tourism, were kind of priced out of the housing market.
So it's very difficult. If a person is making even $7 an hour with 3 children, it's very difficult to afford housing.
The county had an active funding agency, the Greater Santa Cruz County Community Foundation. Their mission was to create a funding base to finance community action. Despite several leadership conferences, nobody could formulate a plan with broad support. Grace Jepson, the foundation's executive director, had heard of a future search. She encouraged the use of a Ford Foundation grant for a future search on affordable housing. The hope was to bring all segments of Santa Cruz County together in a new way. After months of planning, 72 diverse citizens are assembled at a local conference center for a meeting that will occupy them for 3 days. Participants will work together to develop a shared appreciation of Santa Cruz and its housing dilemmas. After a brief introduction by Grace Jepson and an orientation by the facilitators, the participants begin meeting each other at mixed tables. Each table is a cross-section of the whole conference. Everyone was asked to bring items that symbolize life in Santa Cruz.
Together
representing the fact that all of us probably move in different circles. We don't all know one another, but nevertheless we're linked.
The whole rests on a rock, which represents democracy. It is a little crumbled around the edges, but it is nevertheless firm.
Sitting at mixed tables, they soon discover one of the most important features of this event, the opportunity to work with concerned people they might otherwise never meet.
The striking immediacy when I arrived was the vast array of people in the community that were present.
I was particularly impressed that two young people, young men, were invited to participate.
There were people, you know, my age, older, more mature, people that were elderly people, and I think that was very important to have them mixed.
The diversity of the conference was no accident. It resulted from several months of weekly meetings and careful planning by a volunteer steering committee. The committee spent considerable time defining the purpose of the conference and deciding who was needed to accomplish it. The purpose was embodied in the conference title.
What would the title be? How would we convey our message to the other 72 participants in the community to get them to come and do this with us?
We wanted to make sure that we included both the metaphor of housing as the idea, but not so literal that people had to think that they had to come there to solve some particular problem in some very particular way.
They called the conference Coming Together as a Community Around Housing, a search for our future in Santa Cruz County. The committee understood that housing linked to every person in the community. It would be difficult to do anything about the problem working only with housing experts.
So it allowed us to bring educators in, people from churches, all kinds of nonprofit organizations, and the broadest cross-section of folks who cared about their community.
The planning committee devised an ingenious selection process using a vertical slice community matrix. The graph ensured the inclusion of a wide spectrum of residents and diverse viewpoints.
But we were trying to mirror with the stakeholders this community.
So every table was integrated, so to speak. So like if you had the business table, it not only had people who ran businesses, it had people who worked in businesses. If you separated the tables out, so people who ran businesses sat at one table, separate from people who worked in businesses, you would be doing just exactly what happens in the world. You're not forcing yourself to see it another way.
The vertical slice became a commitment on the part of the staff and the planning group that we would make sure in the selection of all the stakeholders that we had represented all segments of our community.
As a result, every table is filled and people are curious as to how such a large group will work together. To establish a common ground for learning, participants are asked to create a shared portrait of the last 30 years. When they are ready, they transfer their work to 3 timelines on the walls. One personal, one global, and one for Santa Cruz County. Having recorded their recollections, participants combine the timelines on one wall where they can be seen together. Each mixed group compiles a history based on one of the timelines. The purpose of this activity is to build a community where people appreciate their different backgrounds. They also recognize that they live in the same world and share many similar aspirations.
The events that had made us who we were kept coming back.
It was very striking to me to recognize how I go about my life sometimes expecting that other people see the world the way I do, and that the significant things that have happened in the country's history we all share as significant issues.
Another core principle of this conference is that each group self-manages its work, selecting its own recorder, timekeeper, and spokesperson.
We put people together on a very level playing field where each one